So I am very excited to introduce our next speaker. I'm also quite biased because we used to work together and I'm a big fan of hers. So our next speaker is Hannah Foxwell from
Morning.
Good morning, from Tanzu Labs at VMware. Hannah's talking about where we started and where we're going. So that's going to be quite interesting. Hannah, over to you.
Awesome. Let me share my screen. Which screen am I sharing? This one. Okay. Can you see a screen that looks like a nice slide and a title?
Yep.
Yeah, people are nodding. Okay, great. Morning, everyone. It's really exciting to be here. My name's Hannah, and I'm going to talk about building platforms that developers want to use. But first, let's talk about why we need platforms. Delivering software is hard. A successful platform makes it easier for development teams to deliver apps into production. And an unsuccessful platform can actually make it harder. I think these stats here, these are pretty scary, but they're also believable based on my experience working with customers and helping to address some of these problems. Only 52% of net new apps ever make it to production. That's a really low number. That means 48% of apps that developers out there in the world are building ever get used. What an enormous waste of time and energy and potential. Now, 54% of software updates and upgrades efforts ever make it to production. That's an incredibly low number as well, especially when you think about how important, keeping up to date with patching from a security point of view is for all of our platforms and all of our technology that we use. And then only 51% of software that makes it into production does so in the planned timeframe. We don't build platforms for fun, even though building platforms can be fun. We don't build platforms to sit there empty, underutilized, gathering dust and waiting for a signal from our organization to just go ahead and decommission that platform. It's not delivering the value we want it to. We build platforms in support of applications that matter to our customers, our users, and our businesses. I feel quite lucky that I remember the days before the internet. There's lots of people now, the next generation who haven't experienced that. They've grown up in an internet-enabled world, in a digital world. But I do remember dial-up as a teenager. I remember getting excited about Yahoo and Napster and MySpace, and we've all been part of this evolution in technology. The internet has began and plays an increasingly important role in our lives. And, when we were younger, we saw those analog businesses around us move online, and those companies that were good at technology having an unfair advantage over those that weren't. With the Agile Manifesto in 2001, software development became agile and development teams started shipping code more frequently. And the businesses they worked for wanted change at an ever-increasing velocity. This was a really tough time to be in infrastructure or operations because it was so hard to keep up. There was this tension between dev and ops. Delivering software frequently and safely needed new approaches and tools, or that velocity was going to be at the expense of stability, and often was at the expense of stability. So I got involved in the DevOps community in 2011, and I've been working in this space ever since, trying to solve these problems for over 10 years now, which is a little bit of a scary thought. In 2011, we were using tools like Chef and Puppet to deliver infrastructure as code. But I remember the shift in the community as Docker came on the scene in 2013, and it changed the game. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Docker and how they were experimenting with containers. Developers simply loved working with Docker. With the development community embracing Docker, we needed new ways to manage these containers. And of course, in June 2014, Kubernetes was founded. I'm really fortunate working in VMware Tanzu that 2 of the 3 co-founders of Kubernetes actually are part of the VMware Tanzu team. And the origin story around Kubernetes is theirs to tell. It's not mine, but my story is really one about excitement and innovation and the impact that it had on the community as a whole. There was a better way of doing things. It was impossible to ignore. this evolution in technology was happening alongside my own personal evolution as I learned more and more about how to deliver software, as I experimented more with different methodologies and figured out what worked and what didn't. You know, like most people, I started with a focus on the technical problems that needed to be solved, configuration drift, manual deployment processes, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you think that fixing those issues will solve all of your problems. But of course it didn't. And it didn't take me long to realize that the organizational, people and cultural problems were harder to solve and took far longer. How do you help an ops team embrace continuous delivery when every release they've overseen so far has taken down production? You know, how do you help dev teams deliver working software daily instead of quarterly? These were the harder problems to solve. And so that's when I got involved in the human ops community to try and elevate that conversation and that focus to the people part of this problem. You know, technology was only one aspect of this. We had a lot of cultural and people challenges to address if we wanted to get better at this, if we wanted it to be not so hard. And in 2018, I got really lucky and joined a team of people who were on a mission to build wildly successful platform teams. We did this with hundreds of customers around the world, and we learned a lot. So my aim this morning is to share some of those important lessons I learned along this journey, building successful platforms, but most importantly, building successful platform teams. I'll say this to start with, building platforms isn't easy, and I don't want to diminish the technical aspect of this challenge. There are hundreds of technical problems to solve. But the way we approach platforms isn't simple either. Right? Kubernetes is a fantastic abstraction layer. It gives you an API to interact with your infrastructure and operate your apps in a fantastic way. But when you think about delivering a platform as a service, this might not be the service you want to expose to your teams. And in many organizations I work with, it isn't the case. The surface area for configuration is massive. The complexity that we present to developers is a burden, or the perceived risk of giving people access to that API is simply unacceptable. And that's when you get the dreaded ticketing systems. You build walls of process around your platform, which limit access to only a few platform engineers. And this hurts developer productivity even more. Of course, like you've then built another silo on your path to production. We've got the old DevOps problem all over again. You know, delivering software to production is hard enough, and we've just made it harder, either by exposing the complexity of the platform to our developers or by limiting their access to a point where they can't deliver independently. We've built a platform as a silo. And that is the key challenge so many of us face. How do we leverage this powerful technology in the right way? How do we make it easy to do the right thing and hard to mess up when there's such a huge surface area for regret your life choices twiddling? I love that quote. Kelsey Hightower said that Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. You know, that's a fantastic quote. I will quote that forever. It's powerful, flexible, extensible, but it's not a developer tool. I don't think, not yet anyway. You know, the wall of YAML is real, and we need to really think about, you know, what service are we providing to the developers in our organization for the app teams that want to land on these platforms. So how do we approach this problem in the right way? And how do we provide that platform as a service experience instead of building platforms as silos within our organization? The State of DevOps report in 2020 called out some really interesting insights that really resonate with my experience building platform teams as well. A product mindset is key to scaling DevOps and your platform. And higher levels of DevOps evolution mean more self-service offerings for developers. So let me start sharing some of my lessons learned. Some of the obvious pitfalls that you can try and avoid if you're just starting out on this journey. First, I'll talk about the difference between a project and a product mindset. When you approach your platform like a product, you build an MVP, but then you keep going. You iterate, you improve, you learn, and you evolve that product with the evolving needs of your users. You don't want to disband that team, and you don't want to reprioritize their time in a way that leaves your platform stagnant and brittle. It's amazing how often I see this happening in companies. You know, what started off with a lot of promise loses momentum simply because people aren't working on it actively. And I hope it goes without saying that deadline-driven development is a really bad idea, especially when you're building a new service. I can't tell you the number of times as a consultant that I was working towards a fixed date with no logical reason. It was a pointless target that inhibited the team's opportunity to learn, experiment, and innovate. It created pressure. It burnt people out. Whatever you do, don't do that. You want to set yourself up for long-term success, not short-term wins. The next thing I see a lot of in teams is field of dreams engineering. And what I mean by that is, if we build it, they will come. They build a platform in a vacuum, never speaking to the teams who might want to use it. I've seen a lot of time and money wasted on this approach. I'm talking millions, tens of millions. When you don't speak to your users about what they need, you miss opportunities to solve their problems, and you're more likely to over-engineer your solution. You try and build a one-size-fits-all solution instead of solving the most important problem that you face today. Similarly, big design upfront approaches are more likely to fail or to waste time. When you try to solve all the problems at once for everyone, you end up in analysis paralysis when you could have used that time to build, learn, and evolve. So here's a model that I found to be really useful when we think about building platforms and platform teams. I'll start with the application team and their mission, because this is really intuitive. The application teams that work in your organization, they want to build an amazing product and a valuable service to their users. The way I like to think about platform teams is exactly the same. They want to build an amazing product and a valuable service for their users, but their users are the developers. They're the application teams who are consuming this platform as a service. And of course, there's infrastructure somewhere, whether you're using a cloud provider or whether there's a data center that your company is managing. There's an infrastructure team, and that infrastructure team will only be successful if they build an amazing product and a valuable service to their users as well. When we provide a platform as a service, we want to allow the application team to both build and operate their applications. We want to give them the tools they need to be successful at that. One anti-pattern that I see frequently occurring is where the platform team are the operators of the apps. And that doesn't really make sense. They're not the right people to do that. They don't have the knowledge of what those applications are doing. The best people to support those apps are the people who built those apps. You build it, you run it. And so, what we really want to look for and what we really want to move towards is this setup whereby, you build it, you run it, and you own that service. You own that service and you provide that service to your users. So let's talk more positively. Instead of things that we shouldn't do, let's talk about some of the things that we can do, some really simple and easy things that we can do to get our platforms back on track. If some of those things that I was saying earlier were resonating with you, ask yourself why you're building a platform. Remember, we don't just build platforms for fun, even though building platforms is fun. We provide a service to developers. And when I say DevX, I'm talking about user experience for developers using that platform. Setting out your mission and building a team to deliver on that mission is the first step. Technology ought to be an implementation detail. Your purpose is to solve problems for your users. And when you're in a large organization and you're in a shared services team, you're supporting a large number of people, it can often feel like everyone is waiting for you and no one is ever satisfied. And, I've been there and I know it's not easy, and that the pressure builds. And, some of the ways that I've seen to make this easier are, by creating that culture of learning and sharing, building bridges with your users, talking to them more often, sharing what you've achieved and what you're working on next in your roadmap. Show that progress, but also seek feedback. Is the thing that we've built good enough? What could we be doing better? Like, how can I help you more? Invite people to regular demos or blog internally, talk internally about what you've built. Really evangelize that platform experience that you're providing. We want to use technology to solve problems for our users, but we can't forget about the health of our own team. Don't let manual work grow to the point where there's no time left for platform engineering and working on new features. Make sure that there's always time to improve. In the Google SRE book, they recommend measuring toil and capping it at 50%, which I think is a really good way to make sure you're always automating the simple and repeatable tasks, making sure there's always time to respond to change, making sure there's always time for continuous improvement. As part of this, you'll need to drive towards self-service so that users can get what they want without ever speaking to you. This is the secret to becoming a wildly successful platform. Give your users documentation, APIs, tools that mean that you don't have to hold their hand as they consume your service. This then frees you up to solve more interesting problems and to evolve your platform. Getting software to production still feels hard for so many people. And I've been working on this problem for 10 years now, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. We're still learning how to do this. And as technology changes, we'll have to learn and adapt with that. But as platform engineers and platform teams, we can help. We can help by delivering platforms as a service instead of building walls and silos within our organizations. And we can help by focusing on the developers as our users of these platforms. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I hope some of that resonated with you. I think we've got time for a few questions now, but also I will be hanging out in Slack if you'd like me to DM me or ask me a question in the channel.
Thank you, Hannah. That was fantastic. I am, as I mentioned earlier, slightly biased because I feel very passionately about some of those same things. I don't think we've got any questions yet on the Slack, but what I wanted to ask was, I love the way you frame it as it's not just about building platform, it's also about building platform teams. And you mentioned that there's, within the platform team, there's dev and ops. You need to be able to do both. I wondered if you could talk just a bit more about some of the roles that you've seen in platform teams, some of the individuals and like roles that you could have in that might not be a traditional platform engineering role.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know where your question is going, and it's I think I mentioned it on one of my slides, but I didn't speak to it, so I'll speak to it now, which is about really having someone who is the product manager of that service internally. If you could imagine you're Amazon for a moment, or AWS, and you're providing a service through an API or something new, you've got a product manager who is really looking at the strategy for that service. What does it need to do today? What might it need to do tomorrow? And how do I make sure that people can consume it without needing to ask me questions? And I think when we approach our internal platforms in that way, and we put a product manager in place who values those things, we drive towards a better outcome for the users of the platform. The extreme end of it is, when you have your platform team in that silo who are interacted with via tickets. But, imagine if a cloud provider did that, how unthinkable that would be. And, these are the platforms that developers are accustomed to consuming. So if we give them a worse user experience within our own organizations, they will simply go elsewhere. Whether or not their policy allows them to go elsewhere is a different story, but they will try to go elsewhere. So
some of us are old enough to remember the hosting industry, Hannah, where management by tickets was exactly what used to happen.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, it's I think maybe when you're starting out and your platform is new, you need to do what works. But I think the important thing is driving towards that level of maturity where your users can get what they need without speaking to you.
I also liked your comment about Field of Dreams development. Like, I love that film. I think that might show how old I am, but I mean, I like that film, and I like the idea of kind of people think if they build it, they will come. But unlike Field of Dreams, that probably doesn't happen. And you talked about collaboration, which is, again, so important, as well as the platform team folks collaborating with the application folks. Are there other people that they should be trying to communicate with them? And I'm thinking more like compliance, security, that those types of groups. try to
yeah,
make sure
I'd be
their
like,
platform
my little
fits?
picture was so oversimplified, and in large organizations, you'll probably chop up those capabilities of your platform into different domains. You'll absolutely need to work with security, and I think one of the definitions of a good platform is that it, is secure by default. It makes it difficult for developers to do something that would put, the security of your infrastructure and of your applications at risk. So yeah, I mean, it's very dependent on the size and the maturity of the organization, but yeah, like I think there's a huge amount of teams that you need to work with, and sometimes I think security teams could benefit from that as a service mindset as well. How can we help the rest of the organization do the right thing with minimal amount of friction?
Absolutely. Well, some of us in security are further along that journey.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you see security as gatekeepers, and sometimes you see security as enablers and educators. But there's all kinds of different ways you can approach these problems.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. And you'll be hanging out in Slack if people have.
Yes, I've seen some questions in Slack, so I'm just going to jump in there and start answering some.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Hannah.
Bye.